we're going to have an entire generation of new facilities technicians and other maintenance folks that have never done this before, that have never been around heavy machinery before. So fatalities are going to go up, safety and injuries are going to go up, productivity is going to go down. And these are very real things that we're already starting to see today. And over the next 5 to 10 years, it's only going to get more challenging. And so now we have to think about what are those next steps to deal with that.
Welcome to Connected FM, a podcast connecting you to the latest insights, tools, and resources to help you succeed in facility management. This podcast is brought to you by IFMA, the leading professional association for facility managers. If you are ready to grow your network and advance in your career, go to ifma.org to get started. As experienced facility professionals retire and workforce demographics shift, the FM industry is approaching what many are calling a demographic cliff. In today's episode, host Wayne Whitzell is joined by researcher and associate professor Dr. Jake Smithwick to break down the data behind shrinking labor pools, rising safety risk and productivity challenges, and why so many new technicians are entering the field without hands-on experience. They explore the growing gap between generational work expectations, the critical role mentorship plays in knowledge transfer and retention, and how AI can act as a powerful support tool. Now, let's get into it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome again to IFMA's Connected FM podcast. I am your host for this episode, Wayne Whitzell, and I am very excited today to speak with Jake Smithwick. Jake, say hi to everybody.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, or evening, whatever you might be listening to this. It's wonderful to be here. Thanks, Wayne.
So, Jake, before I get to your introductions, I want to say how I first came to know you. And we were both asked to speak at the Charlotte, or actually it was the Greater Triangle, Charlotte, and all the North Carolina chapters for the Carolina Summit. And you batted cleanup, if I remember correctly, for all the presentations. And I was just sitting there, just listening to everything that you said, and we're going to talk a lot about this. We have a lot to get through here today, but I was so impressed with your ability to handle data and make it easy for people to understand, but also you scared the bejesus out of a lot of us with some of your data.
It wasn't my intent, but things are afoot. Change is afoot, I'll tell you what.
Yeah, it was, but again, very, very impressed with the way you laid it out. The first thing I thought of is, geez, we have to get you to speak at the Corporate Facilities Council, and we need to get this information out there. But then obviously I started, researching you, and I realized it's Dr. Smithwick on a couple of different levels here. So, why don't you go ahead and give us your bona fides here? Give us a little bit of what it is you do and some of these amazing titles you hold.
Well, you're too kind, Wayne. I worked for a research group years ago out at Arizona State University, and we did some research there. I did some consulting, mostly on the owner's side in terms of project delivery and a lot of different things around that, research and consulting and a variety of different things and other things as well. I was also involved in some kind of oddball jobs. I actually did roof inspections over the summers when I was a young man years ago. So I've been on thousands of roofs throughout the United States. And I would tell you, once you've seen one, they're all basically the same, unless they're really bad, in which case it depends on how bad they are, as to whether or not they're fun to be out there. So I did that for a while. But the main thing was, again, the procurement side of things, project delivery. I'll tell you what, the IFMA Foundation has actually been instrumental. When I was a student back at ASU, there was some other students that had the IFMA student chapter. They asked me to involve. Said, sure, what the heck? Scholarships and how the rest of the history goes. I got a couple of scholarships, went to World Workplace, met all these people, got connected with the research side of things with IFMA. And it's just been truly, these are not just words, but I'm truly grateful for the foundation and the wonderful, frankly, blessings that they've helped myself and certainly many others as well, just to get the word about what FM is. And I've had several other students that have worked with me that have also been fortunate enough to be with the foundation. And fast forward 10 years later, now I'm a professor at the University of North Carolina in Charlotte. The last 10 years or so, I've been doing almost probably 80-90% full-time research in facilities management, benchmarking, procurement, some other things here and there. But at the end of the day, we know that FM is certainly the built environment, and there's lots of things that connect to the built environment. And it's been a lot of fun. So it's been great. So.
Yeah. And researching you a little bit more, for this podcast, I noticed that one of the doctorates that you hold is a doctor of philosophy, and I find that very interesting. It's actually pretty interesting because I have a very close friend of mine who's also an IFMA leader. Is Christian Pilecchia. He has a master's in philosophy, and he also went into the construction side. I know you teach this as an associate professor at the University of North Carolina.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting combination. And I think in some ways, it's almost to deal with some of the challenges in that industry. One has to have a firm grip on the metaphysical some days.
Yeah, it's that's yeah, it's kind of interesting for sure. I mean, there's a lot of different things that we encounter as facility professionals, and the doctor of philosophy is it's a little bit of a misnomer. It's more about how do we look at a situation, how do we resolve that, and certainly philosophy is involved with that. But philosophy is not my core background at all. But that's what the PhD is in, so we'll take what we can get.
Well, sure. So, I mean, that dovetails with everything that you do in terms of logical thinking through process, taking things to their end result, and using red herrings and logical fallacies to get our budgets passed sometimes.
Right. I
So,
hope that's
yeah,
prayer too.
you're right. I've got my business books visible in the podcast here, but if you look up, I've got the philosophy ones kind of tucked in way up top because
Nice,
I don't want to scare anybody
nice,
with
nice.
what's up there. But yeah, I think it makes logical sense. And I also think, too, what I think you demonstrated in your presentations is just my conversations with you is the ability to think in the third person. So there's sometimes when people get really wonky about data and they become academics is I've noticed they oftentimes will lose the ability to communicate complex ideas and abstract ideas in a concrete, simple way. That's why I think you're such a value to our industry. And I'd like to see you and the research you're doing get out there even more. And I was enticed to take a class from you. And I'm so sorry, I forget the other gentleman's name at Fusion. I was an AI workshop.
Oh yeah, Ken Sullivan.
Yes. The combination of you two guys was just fantastic. And I highly recommend anybody to take that. And I guess you can kind of see if we start pulling all these threads together here. We've got AI, we've got design and construction, we've got your time out in the field, we've got teaching the next generation. All these things kind of pull together and you see kind of I think that affords you the opportunity to see a big landscape of the industry and what's happening. So it's kind of a really interesting to have all those roll up into one human being that also can communicate those ideas. So with that, I'd like you to start talking to me a little bit more about the things that we spoke at, or you spoke about at the Charlotte Summit, and some of the things that you think, as a subject matter expert, tell us some of the things that you're seeing and things that we should be aware of right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really kind of interesting. So a lot of this data, I'm not by any means an economist by training or any other sort of the word. I've taken a couple of economics classes, always thoroughly enjoyed it, but I'm not a trained economist or anything like that. But to kind of give folks a lay of the land, and the reason why I bring that economics perspective is that when we look at data and we're really fortunate in, facilities management, what I find that if you're thinking about solutions for a facilities professional, it needs to make their job easier, faster, better yesterday. And that applies to professional solutions, consulting. It also applies to the research side of things. That if we aren't delivering things that can help folks' jobs be easier, help them get those budgets passed, help them run their facilities more efficiently, then certainly that raises questions as to what's the value of the research. And certainly I don't mean to dismay or dismiss other research out there for sure, but specifically for FM research, it has to be real world applied and hands-on. And so when you think about the data that's out there, everything that's we kind of look at, and perhaps we'll go through some of that in a little bit, but a lot of the data we look at, especially when it comes to the workforce, to the built environment, and where the next 5 or 10 years available, it's all publicly available, right? It's not like we have this black box of data that we pull from, and it's all out there. But the challenge here is how do you tell a story, and how do we understand what that data is suggesting us today, where things might be going in the future? Because as you look at the changing workforce demographics, I see it every day in my classroom, but broadly speaking, that the overall demographics of our country and really in certain parts of the world, we are in the midst of a huge demographic and economic shift. And so to think about that, I think we all feel in our bones that things are changing. We know that there's the baby boomers and other folks are going to retire, but we are in the front lines of this shift. And the more we can think about that, the more we can be aware of it. But more importantly, the more we can do something about it and know what's coming down here the next 5 to 10 years, that'll certainly be really beneficial for everybody.
A lot of times we see a lot of people armchair quarterback when they see trends, and they like to, which is one of my pet peeves, to take one data point and then extrapolate an entire theory out of that
Yeah.
data point. And the challenge we run into is everybody's kind of coming from their stakeholder position. What's in it for them, or how will this affect them? And I think with these kinds of big trends here that we see, is it's really critical to look at, yes, look at the big drivers, look at the things that are causing them, but really define what a solution is and what an end goal is that we're trying to get to. And I think one of the biggest things that you talk about, the workforce and so forth, is your slides that you had about population decline as it relates just in general to the economy, and let alone to our industry, I think was pretty staggering. And I think we've heard so much growing up, especially, I'm Gen X and so forth, that you hear a lot about the fears of overpopulation and resource allocation in the world. But what I think we're actually seeing, and in some countries, it's already in the spiral, is this population decline. Can you just talk a little bit about how that relates to this issue of workforce?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been other countries that, in some regards, the United States, that's where I live. There's been other countries that have gone through what the United States is about to go through. So there's certainly historical lessons to look at. For example, Italy, South Korea, Japan in some regards, Germany. They have a relatively older population, and some of that's driven by World War II, and there's other, historical things that have kind of driven that. But you can look to other countries to see what the impact has been, and now it's our turn in terms of the way math works. And it's our turn to go through some of that. But one, to kind of boil this down to practical standpoints, and really a good way to illustrate this is that when you look at the data that's just happened over the last 5 years, so certainly COVID, we're out of COVID now, but COVID didn't cause the issues that we're seeing today in terms of demographics and workforce, but in many cases, it actually exacerbated it. It made it accelerate in terms of what was already happening. So let me give a brief example of that. So prior to COVID, in the construction and facility management workforce, there was about 7.6 million people that worked there. COVID happened, as we all remember. It shut down. A lot of people were let go and left, and so we dropped down by about 1 million people. So we lost about 15% of our workforce as a result of COVID. Well, as we know that construction and other related fields were was counted as a crucial industry, and so they reopened back up. People started coming back into the workforce, and things, relatively speaking, picked up back to where they were. It took a little bit of time, but compared to other downturns in the economy, this was a very rapid turnaround, at least for construction and facilities. But here's where things get interesting. When COVID happened and the people that left the workforce, it wasn't a normal or an even distribution of people that left the workforce, like old people, middle aged people, and older people. The people that primarily left the workforce and did not return were older people, more experienced people. And so when the world opened back up here, you have all these people coming in now. We gained back about 7 to 10% of our original workforce. But after you do the latest data about this, which is about 6 to 9 months old, as of today, we have 8.3 million people working in this space, in construction, facilities, built environment. And yet, we see that productivity is down. There's all sorts of other issues down. And part of the reason for that is that when you do all the math here, the net impact is about 20 to 30% of the entire workforce that's working in construction facilities are what we call green. In other words, they've not really done this before. So, what's the impact of that? Well, there's a couple of things. Many of you, depending on your age here, normally when we be kind of in person, I don't know if I did this exercise with you when we're in person, but one of the exercises I would do is to think about, how many of you in high school or middle school had like a woodworking class or a metal shop class, or something like that, heavy machinery class. And many older folks, almost everybody would raise their hand. Oh yeah, I had that. It was awesome. It was great. I asked that same question to my current students and other younger people, and it's, I'd say, probably less than 10% most of the time. So the fact that we have 20 to 30% of our folks here that are now in the space that have likely never been around this heavy machinery or equipment or facilities, that the risk that they're exposed to is quite significant. So the long-term impact and how that affects us as up and coming future facilities leaders is that we're going to have an entire generation of new facilities technicians and other maintenance folks that have never done this before, that have never been around heavy machinery before. So fatalities are going to go up, safety and injuries are going to go up, productivity is going to go down. And these are very real things that we're already starting to see today. And over the next, 5 to 10 years, is only going to get more challenging. So I know this is not meant to be a totally dark outlook here, but the reality is here, this is what's coming. This is the reality that we face ourselves. And so now we have to think about what are those next steps to deal with that.
Well, this is hence the reason why you use the term demographic cliff in your presentation.
That's right.
It's not hyperbole. I mean, it really, we are talking about a cliff. And for those of us in the industry out in the field here, we see that. I forget who it was. It was another IFMA buddy of mine that used the term, we're seeing a lot more battlefield promotions.
Yes.
So we see, it's not uncommon now to see a coordinator hired and within a year they're in AFM. And
Yep.
then within another year, they're in FM. And I've seen with my own eyes in less than another year, they're a senior FM. Now,
Yeah.
granted, these are probably for some of the big three because what their position is look, we're going to hire these green, as you describe it, green kids to be a coordinator with zero knowledge of facilities, but we've got an international conglomerate behind them as a backstop. In case they
Right.
run into trouble, we can kind of back them up. So I think it can work in those kind of environments with the third party providers. But when you're talking about an in-house position and bringing somebody in that it is really not bringing even a basic knowledge of, I think the previous generations, one of the things we had because of our free range capability as kids was we knew what the limits were in personal interaction from the playground. We knew how far to push things. We knew how to problem solve in a group. We knew how to not get everything that we want. And I think one of the mistakes that we've made in the past is sometimes we lean hard into the difference between the generations and we draw these kind of distinct binary lines between things. And I think we overdid it with the millennials. My personal experience, again, coming from personal experience, was that they're very hardworking, very lovely, very dedicated people to work with. I didn't get that same experience that you would hear from everybody. And I think some of that was manufactured
Yeah.
and created, and it's just the difference in viewpoints that people have sometimes that's exacerbated. But when we look at bringing these people in, and not only that, they're not only coming without the knowledge of pure facilities, or even just in some cases, the ability to think in that this before that way. I grew up programming on a Commodore Victor. Okay. So,
Nice.
so I had to
Nice.
think in terms of basic, right? This
Yeah.
before that and this before that. And that marks almost everything I do in life. But now
Yeah.
all of that's been automated. So sometimes we just come with the lack of the ability to think through those things that way. And then you have the changing perspectives on the workplace from them as well. So that's a different kind of culture. So forget the raw knowledge. Talk to me about the changing perspectives on what the workplace is with the new generations coming in to the mix.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think by way of example, there is another study that had come out. This is from Susie Welch. She's a professor at, I think it was Harvard. And so they actually did a research study about literally Gen Z. That's our up and coming workforce. These are my current college students, other newer folks that necessarily have to be in college, but newer folks that are coming to the workforce. And the study they did involved about 45,000 people. So this is not like your mom and pop survey. This is like a legitimate survey. And what they did as part of the study, they looked at HR managers, hiring professionals, and what they understand is what's important to those folks that make these hiring decisions. What are their key motivators, as it were? And they looked at for Gen Z folks, in other words, the new hires, were their primary motivators. And typically, for years on end, you would see that in general, there's rough alignment. Obviously, younger people have different perspectives and motivations, but in general, if you want to get a job, you find people that have similar characteristics, what you're looking for, and it's well aligned. Well, this recent study that was actually, they published it about a month ago. But what they looked at here is the top three traits that hiring managers are looking for are achievement. They've demonstrated success, they can be successful. Number two was learning or a desire to learn new things, build our skill sets. And number three here was the desire to work, just an innate interest in working, building something, doing something more. That's what the HR folks wanted. The Gen Z people, it was almost like completely opposite perspective about what was important to them. Number one to Gen Z people was well-being or self-care. That was their number one thing. And that contrasts to achievement, which is what the HR people. Number two for Gen Zs were creative self-expression. And number three here is helping others locally. And so when you look at what's important to current HR folks compared to what the Gen Z folks are interested in, there's a lot of misalignment in terms of what people perhaps value from that standpoint. So my advice is, and kind of what I'm seeing here is that, as Wayne, you kind of alluded to, that there are things that in our respective childhoods, myself and yourself, that a lot of younger folks haven't necessarily been through. And so what we're seeing on other types of projects that there is really interesting things out there that we haven't really seen before in the workplace. So for example, you may have a situation where you have a manager or some sort of high level supervisor that might be in their mid 50s and their direct report is in their mid 30s, a 20, 30-year difference. And so when you think about these two people here, they're at fundamentally different stations of life. The older person is after work, they have the flexibility to go out, take a nap, rest, whatever they want to do here. Older folks, or excuse me, younger folks, what are they doing after work? Picking up the kids, running home, doing what they have to do. And so there's different perspectives on what that is here. Now, in this differences here, there's challenges because we have different things that we're concerned about, but also there's huge opportunities for the younger folks to really seek out and find those older people that have tremendous amount of experience. And like I tell my students, that when you go to your first job site, I want you to find the oldest person, the meanest looking person that's been there for a long time, that might be kind of a crotchety. Find them and become their best friend because they know more about facilities and construction management than probably anybody else in that organization. And the more you can learn from them and gather what they have to do, it's a huge benefit. Last thing I'll say about that here too is that I've talked to a number of facilities folks in the last few months here that I forgot who it was, but they said that about half of my FM technician workforce is going to be retiring within, I think it was 2 or 3 years. Half the workforce is going to retire in 2 3 years. Folks, if you find yourself in that position, this is like red alert status. Like we can't let this go here because what we need to do is capture that knowledge. Literally, I would strap a video camera on that person's head, have them walk around the facility and talk about here's how I maintain things. Here's where everything's at. Here's what's finicky about this particular system. Because once they're gone, folks, it's so much harder to capture that.
What if the next facility management conference you attended was built for deeper conversations and connections? That's exactly what's happening at IFMA's Facility Fusion April 7th through 9th in San Francisco. With targeted learning and intentional networking, Facility Fusion brings together decision makers, service providers, and emerging leaders so you can gather real solutions, meaningful conversations, and practical takeaways you can use right away. If you're interested in attending, learn more and register today at facilityfusion.ifma.org.
And on a positive side, if you're an ambitious young person, that to me is an opportunity to get involved in the career now because you used to have to wait for somebody to retire or die
Yeah.
to move up
Yeah.
the ladder. And now it's like, well, how many more minutes do I have?
Yeah. Yeah.
So as you're talking through that, I think I saw the same article or an expansion on that article. And I think it was Susie Welch who said this also, is that HR and the current managers and leaders do not want you to bring your authentic self to work. They want you to bring the self that's going to drive the mission of the organization to work.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things that we've created and technology has created, I think, unfortunately, is it used to be we would have these water cooler experiences, right? We had 3 channels, if you're as old as I am, or you didn't have streaming. And so there'd be these tentpole cultural things, the maypoles that everybody would kind of rally around and talk, and you had these common experiences. But now, literally, that experience has gone to a solo, singular person. I have my own crafted, or whether it's one I choose or whether it's one that's algorithmed at me, I now have a personalized experience of a personalized life experience. So when something is dissonant to that, it's very hard, I think, for younger people to adjust to that because they have such control over the IO port on their brain.
Right.
So I think when they bring that to work, sometimes they want to be authentic and everybody's telling them to be authentic. And all these 21-year-old life coaches are telling them to be authentic. And then they come and it's like, no, you need to align with the mission of the why of this organization. You can potentially influence that why, but not the minute you step in the front door.
Yeah.
And that's a skill I think that we've unfortunately haven't taught that group of folks. I think that we've allowed the algorithms to run that. And you might often hear me say in some of my leadership classes is that I think there's an epidemic of I know.
Hmm.
Oftentimes you'll say something to someone and they'll say, I know, I know, I know. And I started asking, well, why do you say I know? Do you think that I think that you might not be smart enough? Because that's not what I'm doing. I'm communicating to you. And sometimes I might be doing that in front of someone else because I want them to hear what I said to you. Or I want to
Yeah.
know that you know that I know that you know.
Yeah. Right.
But the way it's taken sometimes is I know all of this stuff and I'm not stupid. It's almost like the inability to, well, I always say this, the most intelligent person in the room is often the person who does not have to let you know that he or she is the most intelligent in the room.
Yes.
Right. And knowledge knowing a lot of things used to be really sexy, right? It's like I could tell you all the stuff off the top of my head, but now
Yeah.
I know the sum total of human knowledge in 15 seconds.
Exactly.
So it's wisdom that I
Yeah.
think is what we need to be cultivating as leaders. And you touched on it right at the beginning. You said, seek out that person, that mentor. And it's amazing how often you talk to people later on in their careers and you say, who was it? Or was there a who? What was it? I think people will ask, was it that promotion? Was it that? And they'll point to, no, it was that person that took me under their wing, or in that tough time at work, they helped me through. And I think we don't push that enough on people. We tell people to be these go-getters, ambitious self-starters, and every man and woman is an island, and not realizing the power in that kind of mentoring that's just available to people these days. Now, let's weed AI into this with mentoring. Now, we obviously know the value of a personal mentor, right? Maybe you talk to a young person, you say, who do you look up to? At that point, they might say Kobe Bryant or whomever, right? But later on in life, it's that chemistry teacher that you had in high school, right? That who gave you the interest in biochem engineering or something, right? But talk to me now, because AI, I think, as a virtual mentor, I think a lot of people are looking to AI for that deep research, which we do in the AI tools, but looking there for answers instead of the personal experience. Now, I can tell you, I think there's some value in that, but talk to me about the pros and cons maybe of the integration as AI as a workforce multiplier, both as in productivity, but in mentoring too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really quite interesting. I kind of think about AI and we do our our workshops and different things about that. I don't like to refer to it as artificial intelligence. I mean, that's what it's called. That's the name of it for sure. But I think a better way to think about that, really to extract that value from AI, is to think of it as augmented intelligence, as almost as a companion that can help you do something, that can help you research something, that can help you think about something in a different way, can certainly be beneficial. I mean, anytime there's been a new technology that has come out in the last 100 years, think about the Ford manufacturing plants or the internet or whatever you want to think about, is that there's always that initial concern that, oh, this is going to take away jobs. And yeah, it is. People are going to lose jobs. That is for sure. But also, the opportunities that it reveals to us and new positions that we've never even conceived of certainly is a huge benefit, as we seek to understand what these tools can help us be more productive, or and frankly on our personal lives. So how can we use that to make our lives a little bit easier, a little bit less stressful? Will certainly be a good thing. Certainly, there's limits on that. Social media. There's all sorts of data and research about that social media could lead to a lot actually more stress and more mental health concerns and so forth. But from an AI standpoint, one of the biggest challenges that I think we see here is that it's really AI is probably the first tool where, if you have more experience, more life knowledge, the value people get out of AI is far greater compared to somebody that maybe doesn't know as much, which is interesting because you would think would be the opposite. I think the reason why that happens is because as you have more experience, we know how to ask better questions. We know how to prod, we know how to poke, we know what to look for. And when the AI gets something like that, it's almost like when an expert is with an expert, we can delve even further into the subject at hand here. So, I mean, kind of final thought about this here is that when you think about our current workforce situation and what's happening to the future, is that I think construction facilities, certainly our jobs are going to be affected by how we think about AI and how that affects our day-to-day work. But more than anything, I think this is going to be, it's going to say a savior per se, but it's more than anything as a way for us to help lessen the impact that's coming from the impending workforce shifts that can help us do these things here that we don't necessarily like doing. But if it can make that easier for us, take care of those things that we previously haven't thought about, that will certainly be a great thing. And you got to keep in mind here is that AI just came out. When did ChatGPT? That was November of 23, I think it was 22, November of one of those years. And so it's been out for about 3 years now, and we've already can do all these things here. You give this, 5 more years, 10 times the amount of data centers, and what's it gonna produce is going to be just incredible. So I am very excited about the future. There's certainly things that we're concerned about, but I think the net benefit to humanity is going to be just incredible for sure.
Yeah. Let's look at some. You already touched on a couple of prescriptive countermeasures, I'll call them. I won't call them solutions. I'll call them
Yeah.
countermeasures at this point that we can do. One is mentoring. And I think that an organization could set something up and say, look, as we bring on a new hire, we're going to pair them with someone in the organization. Now I can see HR getting a little scared about that because, here you might pair somebody up with a gruff 55, 60-year old who might not have the dexterity and nuance maybe sometimes to understand that because they might be very
Yeah.
gruff in their, perhaps I'm generalized, right? Let's say it's an engineer talking to you. No, that's not the way you hit it. And then that might offend someone younger who's not used to being talked to like that. So I
Yeah.
think having external mentoring with people that are adept at mentoring, maybe. So IFMA's mentor match program is fantastic for that, getting involved in IFMA. So let's say um, mandatory mentoring of your younger people, let's say connecting them with an industry association, whether it's at their engineering, if they're involved in facilities, IFMA, crew, any of these other organizations, to get them connected with network. And then I think education, and I think one of the things that I would do is I would put new people through the EOFM course through IFMA, Essentials of Facility Management. I think that would put somebody light years ahead. Now, I know some of these organizations have their own training programs that they offer, but getting them connected to the industry and realizing what they're part of with people who have built these tremendous tools like Mentor Match and so forth, I think is a very big value. So right there's 3 or 4 things that are countermeasures that we could do to connect these people with something that's going to help them. Now, in terms of the AI tools that are available, that are out there, I see a lot of stuff come out from AI that I guess this harkens back to the wisdom comment I made earlier, is that we see a lot of knowledge flowing, but that secondary, tertiary, quaternary ripple effect of some of these things that we do with AI sometimes, especially how it affects people, especially when we see very ambitious young people that want to promote very quickly through things, and they may have requisite knowledge, but sometimes may not have the ability to think through how it will affect them. And if they only paired that with a mentor, and the mentor said, okay, great idea. Okay, I see what you're trying to do here, but the way you're going about it won't work because of something technical or something cultural, or you need to watch out for this person here. You might offend them with this. Here's how you
Yeah.
slow roll this. All of that nuance and all of that stuff that does not currently exist in AI exists in another human being with that experience. So when you said find that older, salty, weathered, sinuous person who's been through this, there's a reason why I think you led with that, because I think that's probably one of the biggest levers we can pull
Absolutely.
in helping the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting. You brought up the mentoring thing. One, the research projects we're actually doing with IFMA is we are actually interviewing IFMA chapters right now that have mentoring programs. In fact, I've got a PhD student. She's doing her dissertation topic. It's literally a facility management mentoring framework for FM, because there's a lot of really good ideas out there, but there's what we've not found so far is one cohesive strategy that brings all these different pieces together. So it's building on prior research about looking personalities of facilities people. How do we find mentors? What's the science behind assigning people together and make sure it's a positive experience? It's funny, Wayne, we did another research study a couple years ago with IFMA, and we asked them about different measures of job satisfaction. Are you happy? Do you feel secure? Do you want to stay here for a long time? About 5 or 6 different things we looked at. It was incredible. Every single measure of job satisfaction, those that had mentors were above everybody else in terms of their overall satisfaction with anything that you look at. So clearly, having a mentor positively impacts your work. And I would assume your personal life as well is because you're not stressed about work. So therefore personal life is also better. But having a mentor is just, it's really hard to put a value on that because long run, 10, 20, 30 years from now, it will certainly make a difference. And the research, the data bears that out. And I feel totally confident that that's certainly a valuable thing to look at too.
Yeah. It's such a great topic. There was, I don't know, I think it was last issue of CFC's magazine. I wrote in an article on leadership heavily focused on mentoring and how to select a mentor from the other side. Okay. It's one thing, you just feel great you got somebody that wants to help you, but you should really, I think, find somebody who is more pedagogic. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah.
In their approach, and someone who, I think I said, you look for someone with the emotional limp, someone that's been through it.
Yeah.
Because you don't want somebody that's in it for, social media clout or something. They've got to be in it for you and really get involved in your situation. It can't be this. I mean, I guess suppose you could, if you're only comfortable with kind of a casual two ships passing in the night kind of mentoring, that's fine. But the real
Sure.
mentoring happens when it can go from crying on their shoulder to venting on them to saying, I've got a big pitch to do tomorrow to the C-suite. Can you look at this presentation and pick it apart?
Yeah.
And points in between. And I must say, I know a lot of people who currently do that for a lot of mentees and a lot of people who would be very, very good at it. So we're flush with people like that in our organization, people that are willing to do that. And in terms of your research that you just kind of touched on, maybe let's just, expand on that here as we're kind of closing down here. IFMA's got a tremendous amount of data and benchmarking reports and so forth. And, how can the collection and what's being collected right now, other than you mentioned the mentoring research, what's being collected and what has been collected that can really help us here in terms of navigating these choppy waters with population decline, with the
Yeah.
workforce, and what's going on out there?
Yeah. Great question about that, Wayne. I think there's a couple of things that we're just so fortunate to be involved on so many facets of different research. There's the operational side of things. So, like the benchmark reports, we're getting ready to redo North America here. So, that's coming out. If you have data on a facility, want a free copy of the final report, definitely participate in that because everybody gets that. There's other benchmarks throughout the world as well. We just wrapped up Asia. We're doing that right now. Middle East is coming online. Africa is coming online. And so there's a lot of operational, technical, like janitorial costs, maintenance costs, things like that. There's also other studies like the IFMA's salary and compensation report. So look at salaries, benefits, what's it look like to be an FM. We did that about 3 years ago is extremely insightful. But all this research happens because people participate. They provide their insights. And that allows us to, as research, to go through and look for those patterns as to what's going on. The salary survey in particular led to probably 3 or 4 other major initiatives directly because of what we saw inside of that. Like the mentoring thing, actually, from the data standpoint, we saw something that was like, wow, that's interesting. And we looked through, we checked everything. It's like, wow, that's incredible to actually get data that's consistently across the board about the value of a mentor, for example, was just incredible. So there's many things coming down the pipe. I know IFMA has a number of social media advertisements and other things coming out about these upcoming research studies. But I guess my ask, plea, encouragement would be that when you see a request for IFMA research to come out there to participate, provide your data because it's all of our industries. And by participating, it's certainly what's the phrase that when tides go up, all boats also go
Mhm.
up, and by providing our data, that is a great way to do that as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think with data is we've got folks that like data when it verifies their cognitive bias, and then there's other people that
Yes,
see the data and they say, "Oh, geez, this is
I knew it.
this is reality, and I've got to adjust my reality to this
Yeah,
and to incorporate it." And one of the great things about having that kind of participation is I see the people that have participated in this or where the data came from or the size of the sampling and so forth. And it provides a lot more value. And I think even beyond the FM department is when we go to do budgets or capital planning and so forth. If we have solid data from an organization like this with the sample size and representative organizations, it makes it a lot more valid and vital to some people's eyes. You look at there,
absolutely.
this is where we got this number from.
Yep.
So it's going to only benefit all of us in the industry by getting that participation. So I will also continue to shout that from the rooftops for you as well with all of that. Now, I want to plug you, Jake, here with in terms of getting you some exposure here with some of the other components and other organizations. I highly recommend, if you're a component out there looking for a great topic, a great program, reach out to Jake through either LinkedIn or through his contact information. I guess we can drop that in the description of the video here when we drop this. It's hard for me to explain just the fear that we had and I don't want it to make everybody think, but when you say going off a cliff, and then you show these charts and these graphs, which are very well done, by the way. They weren't these wonky, crazy things. It was the shape of the graphs alone. You say, now look at this shape. Now look at this shape. And everybody's puckered up and said, oh, wait a minute, that's a little scary. So if you're looking for great programming and you're looking for a great topic from an engaging speaker, I highly recommend you all reach out to Jake there. So Jake, I'd like to close with this. Is there anything I should have asked you that you think we should know about, or did we cover it all? What do you think? Are we closer to the bullseye here?
No, I think it's great. I mean, there's definitely concerns about, what the future looks like, and concerns at the standpoint that it's changed, but truly, honestly, I'm super excited about the future. I think the best is yet to come in so many regards. It's going to be a little bit rough here for the next few years as we kind of navigate some of these challenges, but net benefit, long run, I think is going to be incredible. Again, is a fantastic organization for so many reasons. And it's been a lot of fun. And Wayne, I sincerely appreciate you and your efforts and the rest of the team here to host us. And this has been great. And I greatly appreciate it.
Well, fantastic. Well, thanks again, Jake, for being our guest. And everyone, look for future Connected FM podcasts on topics that affect your world. And with that, we'll bid you adieu. Thanks, Jake.
Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to the Connected FM podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate and review the show because it really helps us reach more listeners just like you. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. See you next time.